So I wanted to start off asking you about how Nate, your lead actor in Wuss, how he inspired sort of this character and the film.
Yeah, so Nate and I did a short film called My Mom So Sweet that played a bunch of festivals. We kind of went everywhere with it, and I think we were like in Cinevegas at the time, and we were talking about doing a project together, and so many people had come up, not so many, but some people had come up to me and they've been like, oh, you should make a feature version of Weed because it's a funny story. But I'm a very firm believer that films are the length they need to be, and like I didn't make Weed as a short because I was trying to raise money for a feature. I could have made it as a feature if I wanted to, and it was the right length. That was the length of the story I wanted to tell, and so to me it was like, I don't need to make that into a feature, but I really like the dynamic of the characters, and so I wanted to do a very similar type of character story with Nate, and possibly even at the time with Sylvia, who played his mom in the movie. And I was just having a hard time kind of like, you know, figuring out what that would be. And I had been working on this short film that I couldn't crack the nut on, and it was just specifically about this one like tough high school girl, and that was called Butt Whore, and that was about the girl who ended up being the girl in Wuss. And I had this idea of making Nate a school teacher in that, and that kind of like suddenly all of a sudden like all the things that weren't working with the short started working, and it just like everything unfurled after that. It really was born out of the fact that we loved to work together, and we wanted to work together again, and it just seemed like a good opportunity. And I knew I wanted to do something we'd like, but not the same story. I just like don't like the idea of going back to the well, that very specific well more than once.
Well, that was actually something that, after seeing all your short and then your two features, Earthling and Wuss, how prominently weed.
Yeah, it's really weird because I don't actually smoke that much.
Yeah,
that's the weird thing, because there was so much weed smoking in Earthling that I actually had to go back and cut scenes out, because it was actually starting to freak me out how much there was in there, and they cut like 3 scenes out. And there was like already too much in there, and I went back and I'm like, oh my god, this is a little much. So yeah, I de-weeded it. I pruned the weeds. I pruned the weeds out of Wuss. I mean, out of Earthling, which arguably actually had more like per capita weed smoking scenes than My Mom Smokes Weed. I'm such a hypocrite. I just talk about not going back to the same well, and I obviously went back to the same well. So yeah, I'm a hypocrite. But yeah, Earthling. And the funny story was, like, Earthling was kind of testing the waters with the school that we shot at. We shot at this school, Garland High School, which is like an active public education institute. It's like you know, public school system in Dallas. And like, Garland's a suburb of Dallas, and you know, the sheer fact that they let us do that, and we got it braver with Wuss, because of the Earthling, it's like, oh, what is she, like 2 days here? And then with Wuss, it was like, hey, can we have like 10 days? And like they were totally cool with it. And it's mostly because they have a little film program there, and like we use their students, like their students crewed for us, their students were cast for us. You know, I went and lectured at their school, and like one of these days, like the ISD is gonna realize the inmates are running the asylum, and they'll crack down all the fun. But like right now, it's amazing. It's like the woman who gave us permission to shoot at this school is in the movie. Super small part, but she's in the movie.
And Wuss is a pretty pessimistic view of high school, and I'm wondering where that comes from. Is that personal experience?
I'm very apolitical, so like I did a lot of interviews. People like, maybe with the state of the public education system, and I'm like, no, I have no opinion about it. I'm the most apolitical filmmaker. I had a great high school experience, but I was also the nerdiest high school kid on earth. Like the only autobiographical elements of the film was the fact that, like, the marching band shit and like the D&D shit. Those are the autobiographical elements. I've never taught high school. I've never been in a fight in my life. I tend to run from them. But it's the truth in this film, particularly the truth is in the details. Everything else is just like my lame, like lazy writing of just like, this is an easy scenario. Let's just write this, and it's popped in my head. And Nate's funny to write for, being abused. I like to abuse my actors. Nate's particularly abusable. He's just little. You look at him. He's little, and he can do things to him. So yeah, I mean, So yeah, I mean, autobiographically speaking, or even politically speaking, there's some autobiographical details in specifically in the very, very minute details. I mean, down to the fact that Alicia, who plays Maddie in the film, her character, she's in marching band, but she's literally playing my trumpet from marching band in the film. So the fun little details, but beyond that, it's not. I'd love to be able to say there's some deeper meaning there, but there really isn't.
Yeah. And I was really surprised to see Tony Hale.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Tony is a very kind man. Tony, my assistant director Angie Mott, she shot a film with him called Saronia, like right outside of Austin, and like at one point, like I guess he stole her scissors. Like she's like, I'm gonna let you borrow these scissors, but I want them back. And he never gave them back, so she sent him an email. She's like, all right, two choices. You either give my scissors back that you seem to love so much, or you read the script and possibly agree to do it. And he's like, I can't give you the scissors back. I'll read the script. So he read the script, he responded to it, and it was literally that simple.
Yeah.
And he's been super, super, super supportive ever since. He's like such a sweetheart.
He seems like he would be.
He's a really, really genuine and nice guy, and he's just like so cool. I have not a bad bone in that man's body.
And Wuss has a really dark tone to it, and so does Earthling. And I'm wondering where that comes from in terms of you as a filmmaker.
I feel like I can get out my demons in my films, and like I'm a relatively happy person in life, and maybe this is my conduit for getting it out, I guess. The funny thing is, Wuss was like on paper reads extremely funny, and when we shot it, I think comedy, you play it straight. Like I don't believe in like mugging. Like mugging to me is of no interest. Like no mugging to the cameras. I want people to play their characters very real. And on paper, again, even when you're reading it, it's like you don't realize how heavy the situation is until you actually get on the set and you're shooting it. And like when you specifically coach your actors not to mug, then if you have a serious, these guys are being beat up in this movie. It's like it's pretty serious. When we shot it, we were like, oh shit, this is a lot more dramatic than we really thought it was when I wrote it. And so for a while, I started thinking it more of a drama. And it wasn't until like our first screening at South by that I realized, oh yeah, it does have jokes. And I forgot. I kind of started it kind of did this weird like 360 to get back to where it came from, because it was that first audience that laughed all the way through that was like, it gave me a little bit of relief to remind me that yes, we did indeed make a comedy that is dramatic at the same time. My influences, if I had to have them, and obviously these are filmmakers who are so far beyond me in talents, but like Hal Ashby or Colin Higgins, people in the 70s and early 80s, and who made movies that were comedic but are also very serious, and that played more to the way that life plays, where, like you have something very, very funny happen to you 1 second in life, the very next moment it can be something, a tragedy. So it's like that idea of like, it flows the way life flows a little bit more, and in this blockbuster video generation, that like you have to be able to, like, I'm on a comedy shelf, I'm on a horror film shelf, I'm on a drama shelf. That's larger budget films don't play that way. Somebody's got to step on a rake, somebody's got to fall into a kiddie pool, somebody's got to slip on a banana peel, and that's just not the type of comedy that interests me.
And that actually leads into my next question, which is something that interests me about like filmmakers early in their career is how early they develop a style.
Yeah. And
I'm wondering what you kind of see as your directorial style, or a commonality across your films so far.
Well, styles I think kind of sneak up on you. I really do think. I don't think you go out there and you have a determination of what your style is, or maybe I'm not smart enough to determine that, but I feel like if I do have a style, which I'm starting to realize that maybe I do, it snuck up on me, and I really had no idea what was happening. I mean, you start off, it's like any art. You start off, there are people you like, and you kind of start tracing. There's a lot of tracing involved when you like somebody, and then eventually you take the tracing paper away slowly, and things start to change. The line width changes, whatever. If I had a style, it's more like what I call it less of a style, but more where my interests lie, and it's like the type of characters I'm interested in versus what I'm not. I will never make a movie about a doctor or a cop or a lawyer. I just don't. It's not where my interests lie.
Yeah.
I tend to like. If I had any, like when I was in high school, it's like I would gravitate towards my fine arts teachers or an English teacher. I'm very like writing is what I want to do. So I guess I would call it a style and more of just like where my interests lie. I guess maybe there's a convergence of those ideas and two things come together. I don't know, but the style is slowly, possibly developing out of the sheer fact that I keep going back to the same like influence well, I suppose.
And I think for me, comparing Wuss and Earthling, they both have a very similar visual aesthetic in a weird sort of way. They're both very desaturated. They're almost like Earthling is almost black and white to me.
There's a lot of green. There's a lot of green in there.
Yeah. And then,
much to my director of photography's chagrin, I add that in post. He's like, "Why is this all green all of a sudden?" I'm like, "I didn't shoot it green." I'm like, "I love green. It's okay." Yeah.
But I was wondering if there was something to that visual aesthetic that appeals to you, or that you think conveys your message.
Well, I've always been like, I don't like the way that comedies are shot in general. Like they're very high key. They're very like. The two things about comedies that drive me bonkers, like they're very like brightly lit, and the music is very like dunk, 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 dunk. It's like very like that comedic like drop score is like always so bad. Those two things make me crazy. And I'm like, no, but we should shoot this like a horror film, and it just happens to be funny. I mean, there's so many essays that have been written. I'm definitely not the first person to say that like horror and comedy definitely play in the same emotional kiddie pool. In the same, like, they pull in the same areas. They tug on the same strings, and like very visceral, immediate responses. And I wanted to make a film that had that like those moments. Like in a horror film, you always have that like "don't go in there, girl" moments. Like the girls that have to walk into the old mansion, you're like, "don't go in there." And with comedies that do that, the uncomfortable comedies, it's very much like, don't do that thing you're about to do. Don't kiss that underage girl, or don't do this thing you're about to do. It's like cringeworthy. It's like maybe somebody's not gonna die because they did this thing, but it's gonna do something that you can identify with as a horrible situation. But since somebody else is doing it, it could be funny. And because of that, to really amplify that, I really wanted to shoot things very moodily and very in that kind of style where it plays, it's lit like a horror film. There are very distinct scenes in Wuss that are horror film light, like lit, like somebody's gonna walk up with a knife at any moment, Makeup and the art design was very adamant that like, I had lots of fights with my makeup designer because I didn't want her to look bad. Like she was afraid she was gonna look incompetent. She's like, because the way I wanted the kids to look like the movie, like the kids in the movie Kids. Like I wanted to see like pimples, and I wanted to see like stuff like this, but then she's like, "Oh my god, if I do this, people think I'm incompetent at my job." I'm like, so I kind of split the difference with her. But yeah, it's like I didn't want to make a Britney Spears video. I didn't want to make a Hollywood comedy, like the way it's lit, the way it's scored. I wanted to play more the way the films that influenced me played. Films that were oftentimes very scary or awkward, or that just happen to have levity at certain points. So.
And I was curious about the actors that are playing the high school students.
Yes.
And their actual ages. Because some of them look a lot older than high school students.
They're all high school age except for one.
Yeah.
There was this one freaking kid that's actually older than high school age. We gave the True Blood, the Native American character, he's like 25 in real life. And he's a big dude. I mean, the guy's like big. But he was just like the one kid that's like held back a whole bunch of times. Every other kid is under the age of 16. But kids grow up fast these days.
Well,
I mean,
that's actually a line in the film, and I was wondering if that was actually a play on that line, like if that line was pointing out that, hey...
We tried to make a subtle nod, and my producers are freaking out because I test my films very heavily. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer in test marketing, and I want to see what jokes work and what jokes don't work. And we had this one test screening, and like one of those is, "Oh, your kid's like way too old to be in high school." I'm like, I should go to that high school. And so, like, in deference to the fact that we were like kind of a little nervous about that, I kind of threw him a bone a little bit to like make a joke about like, this kid looks a little older, but no, those kids are genuine high school kids. They literally go to the high school we shot it. 2/3 of those, all those extras are high school kids at that high school. And Re-Up, the kid that plays Re-Up, it was not even 16 at the time.
Wow.
And he was like a New Orleans street kid that we discovered. He was like this street rapper displaced by Katrina. He was actually in that Spike Lee documentary with the levees breaking in them, and this great performer. He never acted before. He's amazing. He's just, but yeah, he's a 16-year-old kid. All these kids are young. The kids grow up a lot faster these days.